Thank you, Worshipful Master, on behalf of Peter and myself for inviting us to speak this evening, and thank you, brethren, for attending in such good numbers this evening. My name is Richard Gutteridge, and I have the honour to be the Grand Superintendent of Nottinghamshire. This means I am the leader of the Royal Arch in this province, and by kind permission of the Provincial Grand Master, I wear this evening my regalia as the Grand Superintendent of Nottinghamshire. And my mission this evening is to explain a little of what the Royal Arch is all about, and perhaps even tempt you to become a member.
So now, as you probably all know, my name is Peter Ball, and I have the honour to be the Provincial Grand Master of the Mark degree in Nottinghamshire. This means I'm the head of the Mark degree in this province, and again, by the kind permission of our Provincial Grand Master, I wear my regalia as Provincial Grand Master. My mission this evening again is to explain a little what the Mark degree is about, and perhaps even tempt you to become a member. Now, this presentation follows on from the address given by Worshipful Tony Harvey to this lodge in January, entitled "The Relevance of the Mark and the Royal Arch to the Craft." The title of our address this evening is "The Keystone Connection." Tony, in his talk, made the point that no mention is made of the keystone in craft masonry. The craft is concerned with squares, levels and perpendiculars, and therefore craft masons, those here this evening, may not know what a keystone is. The keystone is the connection between the Mark degree and the Royal Arch. According to Wikipedia, a keystone is the wedge-shaped stone placed at the apex of a masonry arch or at the apex of a vault. In both cases, it is the final piece placed during construction and locks all the other stones into position. Historically, the Mark degree ceremony relates to a period in the building of King Solomon's temple. The ritual is built around a single verse from Psalm 118, Lapis reprobatus caput anguli. The stone which was rejected has become the headstone of the corner, or the most important stone in the building. And as you would expect, it contains important moral lessons for us all.
The keystone also plays a major part in the ceremony of the Royal Arch, but from an entirely different perspective. Those of you with a knowledge of history will know that the Temple of King Solomon in Jerusalem, which we learn about in the 3 craft degrees, stood for about 400 years until it was destroyed by the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar. The Royal Arch ceremony is set in the time frame when the ruins of the former temple are being cleared, when the roof of the vault, incorporating a keystone, was found. This discovery proves to be enormously important and leads to certain items that are lost in the craft being recovered. So yes, the keystone is the connection between the Mark degree and the Royal Arch, and hence the name of our presentation this evening.
So firstly, let's just address a couple of common concerns craft brethren may have. The first of these is to answer the brother who asks, I was initiated, passed and raised, why should I join anything else? Well, the answer is, of course, being that there are many very good arguments why you should join other orders, but you do not have to. It is not mandatory. It is important to state that you are in no way a second-class Mason if you choose to limit your membership to a craft lodge only.
The second concern is that of the brother who asks, if I joined other orders, where do I stop? I could be out every night. Probably a very good example. We must remember the commitment that we made when we were initiated, that our daily advancement in Masonic knowledge should not be a detriment to ourselves or connections. And this is an entirely personal thing. My wife, if she was here, and I hope she isn't, but my wife, if she were here, would say that over the years I have dedicated too much time to Masonry, and she may be right. And I dare say Kate might well say the same. I've joined many other orders of Freemasonry other than those being discussed tonight. So you must decide for yourself and with your partner what amount of time and money you can afford to dedicate to Freemasonry. And this can, of course, change with your circumstances. I remember several Masons who, having lost their partners, chose to spend most of their evenings at Masonic meetings. Great company and a good meal at a reasonable cost. A great help, I would have thought, in such circumstances. There are also brethren whose circumstances worsen after having joined other orders. They are free to resign at any point, and if they do so in good standing, their membership of the craft is unaffected.
So, assuming you still have a thirst for Masonic knowledge and your circumstances permit, then you have several options open to you in Freemasonry. Whether you choose to become a Royal Arch Companion or a Mark Mason, or hopefully both, there are some common advantages to be gained. The first personal advantage is that you will gain a new set of Masonic friends. How wide this new circle is will depend how close you stay to your mother craft lodge. You will also become better known in the province, and there is no doubt from our personal experience, this can be of great value to those who are ambitious in nature. The second advantage is the joy you will receive from the wonderful ceremonies you will experience and the new knowledge of Freemasonry you will gain, which will enable you to see a wider picture of Freemasonry. Each order you join will in turn open new opportunities to join even more advanced orders in Freemasonry. But I must also point out that joining orders over and above your craft lodge also has benefits for the province. Some Masonic units have over recent years reduced their number of meetings per annum, and this of course reduces the rental income for our Masonic halls. Rental income is usually charged at a fixed amount per member per meeting. So joining a new order will offset some of those losses. A few years ago, Very Worship Brother Richard Davis and Worship Brother David Davis carried out some research and showed that 38% of all Masonic rental income comes from other orders than the craft. So by our membership of other orders, we are certainly contributing to the sustainability of our Masonic halls.
Now, to focus on the Royal Arch and the Mark degree, we believe it is necessary to consider a little of our history, so we can understand how we arrived at where we are today. One of the conclusions reached by Tony Harvey in his paper is that the Royal Arch and the Mark degree were both established in the same 50-year period of the 18th century. Unfortunately, at that time, there were two competing Grand Lodges in existence, both claiming dominion over ancient Freemasonry. By the turn of the century, attempts were being made to merge these two competing Grand Lodges, but their differing attitudes to the Royal Arch was a major obstacle.
The Premier Grand Lodge, or the Moderns as they were known, were formed from an original 4 craft lodges in June 1717 at the Grouse and Gridiron Tavern near St Paul's in London. This, of course, the event which last year we celebrated at the Tercentennial Grand Lodge. Many of their lodge members had also become members of the Royal Arch, but they did not consider the Royal Arch to be part of ancient Freemasonry and did not confer it in their lodges.
On the other hand, the Atholl Grand Lodge, or the Ancients as they were known, were formed from 5 lodges of Irish Freemasons at another tavern called the Turk's Head in Greek Street, Soho, in 1751. We can see these early Grand Lodge officers clearly spent a lot of time in pubs, and you wouldn't see that today, would you? They created an alternative Grand Lodge because they felt that the established customs of the craft were not being followed. They had a diametrically opposite view of the Royal Arch and believed the Royal Arch to be the root, heart and marrow of Freemasonry and practised in their lodges as the 4th degree.
Eventually, in December 1813, the union between the competing Grand Lodges took place, but arguments continued until 1817, when the second Article of Union was agreed. The wording of this still appears as the preliminary declaration in the Book of Constitutions that you all possess today. It states, by the solemn act of union between the two Grand Lodges of Freemasonry in England in December 1813, it was declared and pronounced that pure and ancient masonry consists of 3 degrees and no more. Those are the Act of the Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and the Master Mason, including the Supreme Order of the Holy Royal Arch.
So, by that agreement in 1817, the Royal Arch is not a 4th degree, but it does, together with the craft, make up the entirety of ancient masonry. All ancient masonry is administered from Great Queen Street in London, and our leader, His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, in his capacity as Grand Master of the Craft, the Duke appointed Right Worshipful Brother Philip Marshall to be the Provincial Grand Master of Nottinghamshire. Similarly, in his capacity as first Grand Principal of the Royal Arch, the Duke also appointed me to be the Grand Superintendent of Nottinghamshire. In many provinces, for example Lincolnshire, the Provincial Grand Master and the Grand Superintendent are one in the same person. In Nottinghamshire, the Royal Arch is administered by Provincial Grand Chapter, and we have an office in this building manned by the Provincial Grand Secretary, or the Scribe Ezra as he is known, sitting quietly in the corner there. I am assisted by the Deputy Grand Superintendent and the 2nd and 3rd Provincial Grand Principals, sitting on the back shelf over there, and they are my equivalents of a Deputy and Assistant Provincial Grand Master. Similarly to the craft, we have provincial officers. We have an annual meeting of Provincial Grand Chapter in May. The oldest chapter in this province is Abbey Chapter, number 47, which was formed in 1799 under the craft warrant of Newstead Lodge, number 44, which is now 47.
There is documented evidence that the Mark degree was being practised in the 18th century, both in Durham and Hull and in our own province of Nottinghamshire. Our oldest lodge is Newstead Lodge of Mark Masters, TI, which stands for time immemorial, as the lodge was working before lodge numbers were allocated and actually before Grand Mark Lodge was founded. Grand Mark Lodge was founded in 1856. Its headquarters are 86 St James Street, London. Our Grand Master is His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent, who is the Duke of Kent's brother. I'm appointed by Prince Michael as the Provincial Grand Master for the Mark province of Nottinghamshire. Now, in Nottinghamshire, the Mark is administered by Provincial Grand Mark Lodge. I'm assisted by the Deputy Provincial Grand Master, who is sitting over there, and the Provincial Grand Secretary, who is in the corner, and the Deputy Provincial Grand Secretary should be there and has moved out of the way. What passage will I? We do not have, however, an office in this building. All our administration is dealt with by the Provincial Grand Secretary and his deputies from their homes. We have an annual meeting of Provincial Grand Mark Lodge in March.
So you can see that there are differences between the Royal Arch and the Mark. But do these differences mean anything? In fact, when we started looking into creating this presentation, we found we had much more in common. By way of explanation, let me tell you something about my personal history in Freemasonry. In the early 1970s, didn't that sound a long way ago? In the 1970s, I was married to Linda and we were enjoying our life together before kids. My oldest brother, Mike, was a Freemason in Bentinck Lodge in West Bridgford. And myself and Linda regularly attended Lodge Ladies' Evenings and social occasions. We both liked what we saw and the people we met. So I approached Mike, and after being on the waiting list, and yes, I did say a waiting list, I was initiated as a 24-year-old in December 1974. I was raised in 1976, and my brother and others started to approach me about other orders. My first move was to join a Royal Arch chapter. I had a choice whether to follow my brother into Galway chapter in Chilwell or to join a chapter in my Masonic home at West Bridgeford. West Bridgeford was easier for me from both home and work, so I accepted an invitation from Worshipful Brother John Smee, who I think is here this evening, Worshipful Brother John Smee, and was admitted into the Royal Arch in Hayman chapter in 1977. This also meant that Mike and I could exchange visits, chapter visits, which over the years proved to be very enjoyable. I waited 3 years before I joined the Mark degree, and for similar reasons I stayed in West Bridgeford, and again by the proposition of John Smee, yeah, he does have a lot to answer for, I was admitted into West Bridgeford Mark Lodge in April 1980. My brother Mike went on to be the Provincial Grand Master, as Peter's equivalent. He went on to become the Provincial Grand Master of the Mark degree in Nottinghamshire, and with me being appointed Grand Superintendent of the Royal Arch in 2011, for a short time we were both provincial leaders together. I did join the Royal Arch before the Mark, but the idea of any competition between the Royal Arch and the Mark degree has always been completely irrelevant to me.
Well, I guess I should now tell you about my personal history of Freemasonry. I married to Kate, and despite what was said earlier about being out too many nights and spending too much time on Freemasonry, she does heartily support all my Masonic activities. I'm a double Lewis in that my grandfather proposed and my father seconded me. I was initiated into the Duchess of Portland Lodge, also at West Bridgeford, in December 1972. And yes, Richard, it does sound a very long time ago. Age 21 and raised in October 1974. Now, although my grandfather was a Royal Archmason, I was very curious as to why neither he nor my father had joined the Mark degree. My curiosity got the better of me, and on talking to a member of my craft lodge, who was also a member of the Magdala Mark Lodge, I was advanced into that Mark Lodge in June 1976. Needless to say, members of both my craft lodge and that Mark Lodge were also members of the Royal Arch, and 4 years later in 1980, I was exalted into Edwinstoke chapter. The Royal Arch and the Mark degree are quite different. Each has its own teachings, each has its own lessons, each is very individual in its workings and ceremonies. And as Richard has just commented, and I am of the same view, the idea of any competition between the Mark and the Royal Arch is completely irrelevant. Richard, what is the cost in terms of money for becoming a Royal Arch Mason?
To become a Royal Arch Mason, a brother must be a subscribing member of the craft and have been a Master Mason for 4 weeks and upwards. Also, the secretary or scribe of your new chapter needs to have sight of your Grand Lodge certificate. The ceremony of reception into the Royal Arch is called Exaltation. Obviously, the costs vary from chapter to chapter. The Exaltation fee, which goes to London, is about £34. Chapters normally meet 3 or 4 times a year, and your annual dues would be about £65. A set of the colourful regalia costs about £75, and this includes the breast jewel, which is the only non-craft jewel you are also allowed to wear in lodge. Good quality second-hand regalia is also available for about half the cost of new. Meal costs will be like your craft lodge. Meetings normally start at 6 p.m. and should finish by about 9:30 p.m. There is always a charity collection and sometimes a raffle. Peter, what's the criteria and cost of becoming a Mark Mason?
To become Mark Master Mason, a brother must be a Master Mason and be a subscribing member of the Craft Lodge. The ceremony of reception into the Mark degree is called an advancement. Again, the costs vary from Mark Lodge to Mark Lodge. The advancement fee on average is £35. Mark Lodges again meet 3 or 4 times a year, and the annual dues average around £85. A set of our colourful regalia costs about £50 and includes a breast jewel. Sadly, and it doesn't matter how, which it would change, this cannot be worn in your craft lodge. Again, good second-hand quality regalia is available at about half the cost of new. Meal costs will be like the craft lodge. Meetings start generally at 6 and finish about 9:30, although this does vary around the province. And there's always a charity connection and sometimes a raffle. But the Mardi Gras has its own benevolent fund, which is celebrating 150 years old this year. Each year a festival for the Mark Benevolent Fund is held in one of the provinces around the country, and in Nottinghamshire we do support these festivals. A member is invited to support the Mark Benevolent Fund on an individual basis, but there's no pressure or expectation to donate. Within Nottinghamshire we have our own Mark Benevolent Fund, and one very important asset is both the Mark Benevolent Fund and the not Mark Benevolent Fund can and do react very quickly should the needs arise. Currently we're supporting an appeal for the Nottingham Makeup within the province, which is being very well supported and indeed supported by the Mark Benevolent Fund itself. Richard.
So now you have an idea of the cost in time and money of joining a Royal Arch chapter or a Mark Lodge. What are the other demands that will be made on you by being a member of the Royal Arch? The ceremony of exaltation is a beautiful, colourful and awe-inspiring ceremony, and we believe in the Royal Arch that we have a responsibility to each new candidate to make his reception into chapter a memorable event. Like the craft, the ceremony is most impressive when it is learnt, and that is our objective in the Royal Arch. However, there are also sections of the ceremony which are intended to be read, and the ceremony naturally breaks down into many different parts. So it is also our objective to share the work between as many companions as is possible. It is part of our strategy to respect the various needs of our companions, and our chapters are asked to understand those brethren who wish to join the Royal Arch, yet wish to stand back from taking office on the floor of the chapter until the time is right for them. It is highly likely that if you express an interest in joining a chapter, there will be brethren in your lodge who will only be too pleased to propose you into their chapter. As far as the Royal Arch is concerned, we have a brother in every craft lodge nominated to provide you with information and advice. He is called the Royal Arch Representative, and he is named on your lodge page in the yearbook, and he wears a lapel badge. I had mine on till a few minutes ago, but it fell off somewhere. So it would be a hope of both myself and Peter, and with due deference to the Provincial Grand Master of Derbyshire with us this evening, it would be our hope that you choose a unit within the Nottinghamshire province. There is plenty of choice. There are 35 operative Royal Arch chapters in Nottinghamshire, at least one in all 7 Masonic halls, and one of them meets in the daytime if that suits you better. There are also 2 additional chapters, one in the north and one in the south, available for past principals of chapters. Every chapter was originally sponsored by a craft lodge, and they often share the name and number. For example, Radcliffe Lodge, number 5313, has a Radcliffe chapter, number 5313. So often the lodges and chapters share a common number. And a full list of all the chapters and their meeting dates is available from the desk outside the door of the lodge this evening.
The ceremony of advancement is very special. It actually comprises of 2 ceremonies and does have some elements that may be seen as humorous. I hasten to add, not flippant or lacking in sincerity, but this does add a fun element into the ceremony. During the ceremony, at least 9 members are involved, and at one stage this will increase to 15, if not more. There is therefore a great deal of involvement in that ceremony for many members of the lodge. Again, as in the craft of the Royal Arch, the ceremony is most inspiring when it is learned, as that is the only way to achieve a full understanding of the order, and of course it inspires others to emulate. However, we all accept this is not always achievable. The And Mark Masons will assist and help those who do make that effort, but may be unable to achieve a level of ritual that they would wish. As in the Royal Arch, we in the Mark degree respect the various needs of our brethren and accept that some brethren who join the Mark wish to stand back from taking office on the floor of the lodge until the time is right for them. There are 23 Mark lodges in Nottinghamshire. One of the lodges is an installed Master's Lodge and another is a lodge for Provincial Grand Stewards. Of the other 21, they meet in 6 of the Masonic halls in the province, one of which meets here, is in the daytime. Again, I'm sure there will be members of the Mark degree in your own craft lodge who will be only too happy to propose you into their Mark lodge. But more details about Mark lodges in the province are available from the desk outside the door of the lodge this evening. Now, Richard, what do you remember of your advancement into the Mark degree?
What Peter is asking me is, what do I remember of the night that I went into his degree? That's what he's asking me. I'd been through the degrees of the craft and had been exalted into the Royal Arch, so I was becoming more relaxed about joining a new order. I, of course, completely trusted my proposer, John Smith, and I was determined to enjoy it. I do not want to spoil it for those who've not yet been through the ceremony, but there is a very interesting and dramatic section of the Mark ceremony. I'd figured out what was going on and the part in the drama I was playing. I'm a bit of an entertainer, so I entered fully into the spirit of it and made the most of my parts. So my recollection, Peter, is that while I was being advanced, I was already looking forward to the time when I would be taking a candidate round, a very enjoyable experience. So what do you remember when you were exalted into the Royal Arch?
You're asking me what I remember. Yes, about the Royal Arch exaltation. Well, I was advanced into the Mark degree first, so I had some experience of joining a new order. However, my exaltation was not at all what I was expecting. I was very surprised, but impressed at the ceremony and what was involved. And looking back now, it was performed very well and with much sincerity. On that evening, I can't say I understood what was happening, but the powerful meaning of the ceremony did make me want to find out more and get involved. Richard, what are your aspirations for the Royal Arch in this province?
I thought long and hard about this, and in fact last year we published our provincial strategy flyer, and these again are available on the table outside, so please take one as you leave. Briefly, I know I'm biased, but I cannot see what is not to like about the Royal Arch. It is the beautiful completion of that journey you started when you were initiated. Currently, only 37% of Nottinghamshire craft masons have completed that wonderful journey and become a member of the Royal Arch. So there's still 63% for us to convince, and they are missing so much. What about the Mark degree, Peter?
The Mark degree has had, round figures, 20% of the craft membership in this province for a very long time. I would dearly like to increase that, hence one of the reasons we're giving this presentation tonight. But there are then 80% of the craft members who have yet to become Mark Master Masons. I too am biased. Well, I guess neither of us would be in the positions we now hold if we weren't. But the fun that we enjoy in the Mark degree leads me to believe that the brethren are missing out on another major element in Freemasonry by just restricting their membership to the craft. Now, you will hear Mark Masons say that this is the friendly degree. This does not mean that the craft or the Royal Arch are not friendly. But I've travelled to many Mark provincial meetings, Mark lodges around the country and, of course, in this province, and that particular friendliness prevails throughout. So, in summary, why should a Mason join the Royal Arch?
To summarise the reasons you should join the Royal Arch, and I've got 5 solid reasons. Number 1, as I explained earlier, when a brother was initiated into the craft, he became part of ancient Freemasonry, which our Book of Constitutions tells us consists of 3 degrees: entered apprentice, fellowcraft, master mason, including the supreme order of the Holy Royal Arch. every Mason should experience the whole of ancient Freemasonry. Number 2, because the Royal Arch completes the journey from the practical principles of the craft to spiritual ones. You've all expressed a belief in the Supreme Being. The Royal Arch develops that relationship. The Programme Master himself uses the analogy of ancient Freemasonry being like a TV suspense drama, consisting of 4 episodes. Who would be enthralled with the first 3 parts, only to miss the last episode, where all is explained? Reason 3. Because the ceremony of exaltation itself, it is so beautiful and thought-provoking, most Royal Arch companions, myself included, will never forget that moment we were exalted into the Royal Arch. 4th, for the companionship and the increased enjoyment of Freemasonry, part of the ritual in the Royal Arch encourages us to please each other and unite in the grand design of being happy and communicating happiness. So happiness is a key factor, and the statistics prove that once a brother is a member of the Royal Arch, he is less likely to resign from the craft. And 5th, for those who seek even more Masonic knowledge, the Royal Arch is the qualification to join further orders such as the Knights Templar and the Red Cross of Constantine. I'm glad I put that in, seeing as the leaders of both those orders are present this evening. So, in similar summary, Peter, why should a Mason join the Mark degree?
Well, I was going to say I've got 5 points, but I've got more than that, so I'll stop numbering them. Undoubtedly, the Mark degree will assist you in making a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. In some respects, it sits between the Fellowcraft and the Master Mason's degree and helps to explain and fill in some of the gaps. The structure of the lodge and the meetings are both similar, yet different to the craft. Importantly, there is a piece of ritual in the advancement ceremony that says, should other friends forsake you, among Mark Master Masons you will ever find friends. I can testify, brethren, that is without doubt very true. And again, unsurprisingly, our statistics prove that once a brother is a member of the Mark, he is less likely to resign from the craft. For those who seek more Masonic knowledge, the Mark degree is a gateway to further orders such as the Royal Arch Mariner, Royal and Select Masters, and the Allied Masonic degrees. I would agree that most Royal Arch companions, and I include myself, will never forget that moment they were exalted, but the same applies to being advanced in the Mark degree. Those ceremonies lead to a much wider, interesting, and enlightening part of Freemasonry. One point I would like to mention is that we traditionally in the Mark degree hold a weekend away each year. In fact, this year the weekend is at Stratford-upon-Avon in September. We hold a T20 cricket match event at Trevbridge in the summer and a Cantonese evening at a local restaurant in November. These are all very well supported. And several of our Mark lodges have very popular Sunday lunches. So Richard.
So, there you have it. The Keystone Connection between the Royal Arch and the Mark degree. I hope you are all now happy to join the Royal Arch.
I hope you're all happy to join the Mark degree. But even better,
join both.